Right, it is time to wander the world. And where might we be going today? We are visiting the world's largest island. About 80% of its surface is covered by a massive ice sheet, and US President Donald Trump keeps threatening to annex it. If that last bit doesn't give it away, then let me tell you today we are taking a virtual trip to Greenland. Together with travel writer and CapeTalk listener Brian Berkman, who had the privilege of visiting Greenland in June this year. He spent a fortnight on board Le Commandant Charcot, which is the world's only luxury icebreaker, a very uniquely adapted vehicle that can travel in the Arctic and Antarctic regions through the thick ice that must be navigated in those waters, and obviously give the lucky souls on board access to parts of the planet that very few of us get to explore in person. We're so grateful to have Brian with us via Zoom this afternoon to share the experience with us. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for being prepared to chat to us about this because it's a part of the world that so few people have had the opportunity to visit. Brian, it sounds like a real bucket list trip of note, but let's start with some of the sort of nitty gritty questions. How do South Africans physically get to Greenland? I mean, you went there by ship, but where did you connect with the ship? If one wants to plan a trip of this kind, where do you start?
Um, so we started in Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland,
Right.
and we connected via Amsterdam. So Cape Town, Amsterdam, Amsterdam, Reykjavik, and there we got on the ship at Reykjavik. 14 days later, we returned and repeated the journey.
Okay. And not just any kind of ship, as I've referenced in the introduction there, a very uniquely adapted ship, but one which sounds like it's adapted for luxury as well. Brian, give us a sense of how you were traveling.
Well, you're correct in saying it's a bucket list experience. The destination certainly is, but so is the ship itself. So Le Commandant Charcot, which is owned by Ponant Explorations, a French company, um, she is designed with a PC2 hull to be able to cut through the ice. And interestingly, she does that with a rounded front hull. It isn't a pointy hull that you'd imagine. So the
Yeah.
weight of the ship breaks the ice. And the captain describes it as the way you'd break a slab of chocolate into little blocks. So, uh, which it really is it is an extraordinary experience to witness this, and in particular to witness the silence of the Arctic. That's something that I had no idea would be such an important experience of this trip. Is that when you are there and the ship isn't breaking the ice, which of course makes a sound, you
Yeah.
hear almost nothing. And of course, there are birds and natural life, but it's the sense of being so extremely remote. And during the 14 days, we didn't encounter another ship. We stopped at one village, Kormit, where there were 350 odd people living there, and we visited with them. But other than that, it was um, a small group of us on the ship.
Got there flying Amsterdam to Reykjavik. You've boarded the ship. You've now
Correct.
sailed towards Greenland. And as you said, most of your activity was away from human population. This is, in fact, I think I'm not mistaken in saying the least densely populated settled place on Earth. So not surprising that you didn't
Correct.
interact with a lot of other people. But what
Correct.
did you see in terms of wildlife and places where you stopped?
Well, let me say, Pippa, that the captain of our ship during the introductory talk said he would wake us at any hour if there was something worthwhile seeing. And of
Yeah.
course, one doesn't really think that's going to happen, but it did. And at about 1:30 in the morning, the first morning of our cruise, we were woken up and asked to come down to deck 5, which is the promenade deck, to see a polar bear. And
Oh, wow.
it was beyond my expectation of what that would be like and how close the bear would be. So it actually walked towards the ship. So when we first saw it, it was about 100 meters away, but it was fascinated in, it was aware of of us being there. And the only sound we could hear were people's cameras clicking. It was just the most
Mm.
incredible experience. And of course, in Greenland in summertime, it's sunlight for 24 hours a day. So even at
Right.
1:30 in the morning, it was bright light outside. So that was our first experience. And then we saw and heard many, many kittiwakes, they look like seagulls, but the or the bird expert on the ship
Yeah.
said they're not seagulls. Kittiwakes are specific Arctic birds which get their name from the sound they make. They make that like kittiwake, kittiwake, kittiwake sound. And we
Okay.
saw little auks, which are the most numerous bird in the Arctic, and pink-footed geese. That was really a wonderful environmental experience.
Speaking of environmental experiences, Brian, this is a part of the world which, when one thinks of the impact of global warming and, glacial creep, etc., you think of Greenland, the most misnomer of a name in history because it's covered largely by ice. But
Correct.
did you see any signs of receding ice or any impact of climate change, or was that pointed out to you by any of the experts on board?
Yeah, so this was our first experience there, but it wasn't the first experience for many people on the ship. And many of the crew who've done this trip year in, year out commented on the visible. Uh, there's no question as far as they're concerned. The ice is receding. It's getting warmer sooner, and it's not a case of well, yes. So from the scientists' point of view, the climate change is happening, and it's happening rapidly uh, up in Greenland. And
Okay.
yes, oh dear, indeed, because if I think I don't quote me on this particular fact, but there is so much water stored in the ice sheet that if that were to melt, global sea levels would increase by 20 feet or something. So it's an extraordinary thing that we need to be aware of. And
Absolutely.
if you have an opportunity to go, now is the time to go.
Somebody asking why is it called Greenland? Brian, I mean, I made a quip
I,
about it because it is such a misnomer, but
yes,
there is an actual reason behind that
there,
misnomer, isn't there?
there is. So Eric the Red, who was a Viking who committed some crime in Iceland, where he lived, was banished from Iceland, and so he made up this PR tale about this beautiful green lands that people would discover if they came with him. Of course, that was the biggest lie because Iceland is incredibly green and Greenland isn't.
How funny.
So
Okay.
it was the first PR stunt.
In recorded history, perhaps.
Yes.
Brian, I don't know if you were there specifically at this time of year in pursuit of the 24-hour day, or if there is a chance of seeing the Northern Lights at this time of year. I think that's
Yes.
probably, is it possible in June?
No, you see one or the
No.
other. So
Okay.
it needs to be dark for you to see the Northern Lights.
Yeah.
And we had the 24-hour day. In fact, when we arrived back in Reykjavik, it was the summer solstice. Um,
Okay, so absolutely not going to
so
happen at this time of year,
no,
but I'm right in
no.
saying you can see them in the
Typically,
opposite
yes.
season. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And the area is famous for that. Um, You also
Okay.
don't really have a real sense of how large an area Greenland is. So, the North Pole is at 90 degrees, and we went as far as 87 degrees, which
Phew.
was still about 12 or 1400 kilometers away from the North Pole. So it's very, very far north. And it takes, and one of the reasons why such a trip is so costly is it takes a long time to get to where you're going. Um,
Hmm.
so, it's people will balk at the price. I was an invited media guest, so I'm so grateful for that. But most of the people on board had paid the ticket, and when I asked why, they said, "Well, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it was important for them to be able to go to where the explorers of old went." I don't know if you've seen. There's a documentary. I think it's still on Netflix called "Two Against the Ice," and it's the
No, I
story
haven't.
about Mikkelsen and Iverson, who were two Danish sailor explorers, and
Hmm.
the purpose of their trip was to find the previous lost exploration cruise, which was called the Denmark expedition. And you talked about Donald Trump earlier. this isn't new. The Americans have been after Greenland since those early days in the 1900s, where they claimed that
Really?
Cap Parry was part of the American land, but the Danes proved that it isn't. That Greenland is an island, and that they have claim to it. So it was Ericsson and Iverson, and they ended up spending two grueling winters in
Oof.
the area that we were exploring near Shannon Island, on Shannon Island, waiting to be rescued. So if you get a chance to see that, it's well worth a thing to watch.
Thanks for the tip on that. And Keith, that does answer your question about the status of Greenland. It's not an independent country, it's an autonomous territory falling under the
Of
Kingdom of
Greenland,
Denmark. Of Denmark. So thanks for that
correct.
question. Brian, let's just circle back to what you said about most people on board had paid full price. Now, look, it was a luxury experience. I understand it was Michelin star food and incredibly luxurious accommodations. But
Yes.
what is the price for somebody who is paying full ticket? What should one set
Well,
aside for
it's
this bucket
about
list experience?
it's about R1 million for a couple.
Okay.
So yeah, it's 500,000 rand per person sharing, give or take. The prices are in euros and pounds, so it depends what the exchange rate is.
Okay.
Um, but once you're there, everything is supplied. It's a fully inclusive experience, including champagne and caviar and all of those wonderful luxuries. Um, but as wonderful as those are, and they are wonderful, and to eat at an Alain Ducasse restaurant on the ship, the only ship at sea with one of his restaurants,
My gosh.
amazing. But it's a very, very dangerous environment to be in, and you have to consider the costs involved in being able to bring back if something goes wrong. The ship can survive for 3 months. It has enough liquefied petroleum gas on board to operate for 3 months without
Gosh.
visiting us ashore. And each cabin is equipped with two life preservation suits, which effectively are mini rafts. So if something happens, you are most likely to survive, and that's where the money is. The money
My
also goes
goodness.
to their science program. So
Yeah.
Ponna spent last year, they spent 2.2 million euros on science investments. And there are two laboratories on board, and we met and interacted with the teams, one French team and one team from Chile. And we had completely open door access to them. In fact, the Ponant science officer told me that when he isn't on the ship, he's lecturing at a university in France,
Yeah.
and people cannot just walk into his office to talk to him to ask him something. Whereas that is what you get on this experience. You get access to people who are the world experts in their field, and you're real scientists, not it's not greenwashing.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to accept that that is also what goes into the elevated price.
So R1 million per couple, and on top of that, your flights to get to Reykjavik to meet the ship, because that R1 million is the cost of the
Yes,
2 week journey on the ship itself. So
correct.
just bear that in mind. Obviously, that is something that is going to be beyond the reach of your average traveler, but just such an incredible experience to have lived through vicariously with you, Brian. Before we let you go, I mean, you've spoken about the impressions of the silence, the incredible sighting of a polar bear. What other sort of moments will stand out for you as the highlights of this adventure?
Well, one of the activities is what they call a polar plunge. And
Yeah.
that is where people sign up to jump into water at minus 1.6 degrees centigrade. And I'd actually signed up for this because I'd considered that the other activities would be too difficult for me to cope with physically. And then I chickened out at the last minute. The ship's doctor gave a very stern warning of the various risks, but many, many people did it, and everyone survived and said they'd enjoyed the experience. So that is something I'm sorry I didn't do, but I did walk on skis for the first time in my life. I went on a dog sled, went pulled on over the ice on dog sleds with 10 huskies. first time
Phew.
ever. And to arrive back at the ship after walking on the tundra and have champagne and caviar served directly on the ice. I mean, that blew my mind.
Hmm. What an incredible experience. Brian, thank you so much for painting such a vivid picture for us. I mean, once in a lifetime doesn't even begin to touch the surface of how lucky you are to have had this experience. Thank you so much for sharing it with us today.
Thank you, Pippa. If people want to know about the cruise, Everything Cruising is the South African company. Can I give the
Yeah.
number out, or do you have it?
Please,
It's O
you can
double
do so with
one.
pleasure. Yeah.
Okay, it's O double 1 463 1170. So that's Everything Cruising. They are Ponant's agency in South Africa, and they will make all arrangements. And next year's cruise is already almost fully booked. So best to look at the year beyond that, which will give you some time to
To
save
start
the
saving.
cappuccinos. So thank you for the opportunity, Pippa.
Lovely to have you with us, and thanks for reaching out about this extraordinary experience. Brian Berkman chatting to us about his trip to Greenland in June on board Le Commandant Charcot. And if you have had an absolutely extraordinary and unusual travel experience that you would like to share with us on Wonder the World, please feel free to drop me an email to pippah@capetalk.co.za.